Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of the Players NIL Industry Insider Podcast and my special guest today, Jacob Turner. Jacob, welcome to the podcast.
Mark, I appreciate you having me on.
Well, as I said in our preamble, I've been chasing you for a while. I've admired your work. I think I appreciate your background and the reason that you do the work that you do. And we'll get into that. You're the founder of Moment Private Wealth. You're a financial literacy educator. You're a wealth manager. You're a former professional athlete, college athlete, obviously high school athlete. We always want to talk about how people used athletics to better their lives. So with that goes to the early part of your life. Tell us a little bit about your first experience in sports, who your heroes were, what they taught you, what you learned from them, how it drove you to be the person you are today.
Yeah, I mean, sports has always been a huge part of my life. I grew up with two brothers, so as you can imagine, like we were always playing sports. And one of my earliest sports memories is actually watching Sports Center. When we first got cable TV, I can remember watching Stuart Scott and Sports Center like every single night. And we were just addicted to anything that had to do with sports and competition. And one thing I'll say about that I feel like a lot of people miss is so often now is what I see is like parents that are trying to live through their kids and hope their kids become professional athletes. And I think that's the wrong goal. Like I learned so many lessons in sports from an early age that had to do with life lessons that frankly had nothing to do with whether I played professional sports or not.
Yeah. I think, we could talk about the age of specialization. We could talk about year-round sports. I think things like Sports Center have added to that, right? So I'm older than you. We didn't have Sports Center. I had Sports Illustrated once a week in the mailbox, okay? Or
Hey,
the
I got
Monday,
that. I got Sports Illustrated too. I had them all on my wall in my room.
right? I mean, I had to look at the box score on Monday morning in the newspaper. Today that would be obviously 24-hour news, age-old news. But I think what it's done is it's created this mindset that, athletics is cool, athletics is fun, sports is amazing. We know sports fans in America are crazy about their athletes. And it's created this pressure system, which we could talk about. But at what point during this journey of your childhood did you realize, oh, I might be okay at this and I might have an opportunity to go to the next level? Was there an aha moment? Was there a period of time? Was there someone that said that to you?
I can remember probably 14 or 15. I started to realize like I'm relatively good at baseball, but what I'll say is like my goal with baseball was sure I wanted to play professional sports, but that felt a little bit like a pipe dream. I thought if I could play Division 1 college baseball, that would be like the highest level that I could get to at the time. I remember going to some winter camps and feeling like, okay, maybe I would have a chance at this. But I think one thing that's interesting to note is like even as a 14 or 15-year-old, I wasn't the best player even on my team. And I think that's a huge thing for people to understand as they're thinking about youth sports. Like, you don't have to be the best player at 14 or 15. And frankly, most of the people that are the best players are not the best players by 17, 18, 19.
Yeah, well, it fits perfectly into what I'm doing. Uh, this name, image, and likeness era, as I call it, has created all kinds of opportunities for college athletes, and now we see it in high school, which is creating more pressure. And I'm getting ready to release my second book about influencers. The third book that I've been working on is entitled 12-Year-Olds Win for All the Wrong Reasons. Okay. It's a parenting book. And it's to your point, they grow faster. And I'm not a huge baseball guy, but I understand this. But it does turn my stomach when I watch Little League World Series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and I see the biggest kid on the team is the pitcher, and the stardom that's thrown at him or she at one time, and that's not realistic. It's not a straight line to age 16, 18, and 20. In baseball, in particular, what are the things that separated you once you realized that you had the opportunity that gave you the professional opportunity that you created?
Well, I think the first thing is something that has nothing to do with on the field, but it has everything to do with mindset. When I think about what separates people at any level, whether it's sports or business or life in general, it's the self-belief they have in themselves. I always believed that I was the best player on the field, and I don't say that in an arrogant way, but I think every really good athlete, if you talk to any pro athlete, they believe before anybody else believes. I think secondarily, I had a lot of God given ability. There's no doubt about it. Like I put in a lot of work, but without the God given ability that I was blessed with, there's only so much work you can do. And for me, I was blessed to be able to throw the ball really hard and be able to move my body in certain ways to pitch at a really high level.
Yeah. Well, you did at a very high level. You played in the bigs, as they say in the movies, right? So Tell us about that professional baseball journey.
It was an interesting one. So I got drafted as an 18-year-old. I was the ninth overall pick in the 2009 draft, and really went from being a high school kid one week to being a professional athlete, and feeling like a bit like I had a target on my back because I was such a high pick. I'm coming into this organization with 21, 22, 23 year olds that I'm playing with, and just trying to get my feet underneath me. And professional sports in general, it makes you grow up really fast. From 18 to 21, I wasn't going to college parties and doing fraternities and doing all that sort of stuff. I was trying to make it to the big leagues, and it was my job. And while I enjoyed it, there's certainly a business aspect to professional baseball that I think a lot of people miss.
Yeah, you talk about in your work about that contract and what you made and how you've leveraged it for your future. What's it like to be 19 years old and have money, real money in the bank?
Yeah, well, the line I always use is it changes everything and it changes nothing all at the same time. And what I mean by that is I don't want to discount what money does. Like we live in a world that revolves around money. We trade money for, whether it's our time, whether it's our freedom, whether it's things that we want to buy, food, etc. It's an extremely valuable part of our culture. But at the same time, it also didn't change anything. I remember as an 18-year-old, I signed this contract. I remember we went out for ice cream that night. The next morning I wake up and life goes on. And I'm excited about being a professional baseball player. And honestly, wasn't really thinking about the fact that, like, wow, I'm going to have millions of dollars in my bank account overnight. But it was a huge blessing. And for me, it ultimately led to this career that I had 11 years, lots of ups and downs, and fortunately led me to what I do now.
Yeah. So you're the founder of Moment Private Wealth. You've taken this athletic experience, you've turned it into an opportunity for you using athletics to better your life. Your career ends, maybe prematurely, maybe in some people's eyes, better, worse than anyone expected, but you're in the top minuscule percentage of people that get there. You've gained a lot of life experience. Um, Moment Private Wealth, what do you do, and how do you try and share your experience with your clients?
Yeah, well, before I even say what we do, I just want to make a point on professional sports, but really sports in general. When I say life lessons learned, I think about all the lessons I learned through sports and how they've helped me now in business. One of them in particular is just the ability to keep showing up. I think athletes have this unique ability that's ingrained in them from a young age to understand what failure is, especially as a baseball player. We fail a lot, and the ability to keep showing up even when you don't fail. And that really led me to starting the business that we have today. So Moment Private Wealth, we are a fiduciary RA. So all that means is we're a registered investment advisory firm. We specifically serve the needs of high growth entrepreneurs and professional athletes. And Mark, really the tie in there between those two groups of people is they have this ability to come into what I would call sudden wealth, a lot of money in a really short period of time, something that I experienced personally. And it's really a passion of mine to be able to help people that bet on themselves make the most of their financial outcomes.
So you missed the name, image, and likeness era. I missed it by a lot more years than you did. But now we have 18, 19 years old, like you, who, for all intents and purposes, are now professional athletes, right? They're getting
Yep.
paid to play sports. Maybe not everyone's Shador Sanders getting millions, but certainly there's thousands of kids making what could be life-changing money if they manage it properly, 20, 30, 50, 80, 100,000. Some of the basketball guys, the everyday basketball players are making 300,000 a year in NIL. Uh, Collective payments. Okay. What do you, how do you work with an 18-year-old, 19-year-old? What are the messages? What are the mechanics that you would like to put in place if asked to protect them? And what are the pitfalls that you see that are most common mistakes that someone in that situation makes? Maybe something that you've made a mistake with.
Yeah. To give context too, we do work with a lot of the top NIL athletes, and really the starting point that we start with is helping them just understand that the opportunity that they have in front of them is something that's really unique. And what we try to do is we try to start with the end in mind. And when I say that, what I mean is if we got to the end of college and we weren't going to make another dollar from sports, we weren't going to go on to play professional sports, but we had this incredible NIL opportunity today, what position do we want to be in at the end of that 3 or 4 year period? And then really helping them work their way backwards to understand if that's the position that you're telling me and you're buying into wanting to be in, what are the steps that we need to do today to try to be in that place in the future? In terms of the biggest mistakes that I see, the two biggest mistakes that come to mind is not thinking about taxes with NIL. It's a little bit different than W-2 income. So W-2 income is just money that you're making from the organization, the team, the company that you work for. When you get paid that money, there's typically tax withheld. It's usually pretty close to what you're going to owe. You might owe a little bit more, you might get a little bit back. With NIL income, it's typically 1099, which means that the collective or whoever you're getting paid from is going to pay you all the money. So the example would be is if you're making $3,000 a month, they're going to send you a check every month for the $3,000. And it's completely up to you to make sure that you allocate some portion of that for your future tax bill. The second thing is just building a really unsustainable lifestyle. NIL is it's almost a status game now where not only are guys getting paid money, but you see some of these top colleges have Lamborghinis out in front when they have top recruits come in. Now, look, there's guys that I'm sure can afford Lamborghinis, some of the top, college football prospects that are making NIL money. But the vast majority of NIL guys should not be buying Lamborghinis with their money. So making sure that they understand, like, what is the opportunity set that I have in front of me and what could the lifestyle that I could build that could be sustainable when I get done actually look like?
So we're living in an age where athletes have never been celebrated at a higher level than where we are today. Because of ESPN and all of the broadcast. I just read and posted this week that the Paris 2024 Olympics had 23.5 billion minutes of social media content around the Olympics. And so many athletes use that to grow the brand and I hope monetize it. But again, it's the limited few. I'm focused on the 98% that aren't getting paid by collectors. What would be some real important advice? And I don't want to get into any legal problems here or advice problems, but give us a general concept for a parent who's got a kid that's all of a sudden stepping into $3,000 to $5,000 a month to play a sport in college as an 18-year-old. Like, what should be the mindset about how to manage that opportunity?
I think in really basic terms, you have to understand that there's only three things that you can do with money. You can save it, spend it, and give it away. And no matter how much money you're making, whether it's $3,000 a month, $30,000 a month, or $3 million a month, you can still only do those three things. And helping a college athlete understand, especially one that's just coming into NIL money, think back what it was like a month ago when you didn't have this money. You're probably pretty happy. Like all you really wanted to do was be able to fill up your car with gas, maybe go buy Chipotle and hang out with your friends on the weekends. So this money is not going to change your level of happiness, and we don't have to spend it all. So understanding like what is a reasonable budget that we should be trying to stick to in those first couple months? How much of this money should we be saving? If we want to be giving away any of this money, how should we potentially be giving it away? And one of the really cool things I think that NAL provides for guys that will go on to maybe become either professional athletes or go on to have successful careers outside of sports is NAL allows players, no matter what level they're at, to start dipping their toe in the water of personal finance and to start understanding what steps do I need to be taking as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old to be able to start to set the foundation for wherever life takes me. Some of those guys will get drafted in the first round of whatever league they're in. Some of those players will never play a day of professional sports, but they can learn the lessons that they need to learn from a financial perspective while they're making this NIL money.
I see this in life. And as I think I mentioned, I have 5 children, adult children, and they and their friends, and maybe this is a failure on my part as a parent, about NIL and financial education. When should we start financial education for young people?
Yeah, I think it starts early. I have 4 kids myself, and I try to have financial conversations at the level that they can understand even now. And to give context, my kids are 9 to 3 years old. So my 3-year-old has no idea what money means. She tells me that she has monies and she has like a fake $1 bill, I think, from the Monopoly game upstairs. But I think it can happen early on. And I think, frankly, it's just being more open about money. A lot of times, money is like this taboo topic that we don't talk about. And then when you come into it, you don't really understand what to do. You don't understand what saving looks like. You don't understand what a budget looks like. You don't understand what a debit card is or what a credit card is. For my kids right now, it's like helping them understand like it takes really hard work to be able to earn money. And then once you earn it, you have the decision of like, well, how much of this should I be spending versus how much of this should I be saving? Let's do some of those foundational concepts to make it less taboo around money.
Yeah. So that's the when. Earlier is better. But let's go back. Let's come to maybe high school kids or that age where they can understand the concepts. The second question is who should deliver financial education? Where should it come from?
I'm going to give you the best worst answer I have, but I think it really depends. I think it starts with the home life that somebody has, and whether that's a parent that's giving that to them, whether that's a guardian that's giving that to them. It starts with the example that that person is setting for them. One of the things that I'll say that I see time and time again is when an athlete comes into money, one of the first things that I'm looking for is what is the family dynamic background that they're coming from. Our decisions around money are inherently shaped by 0.0000001% of the decisions that have happened in the rest of the world, but they're the decisions that we've seen. An example I would give is I can remember in 2008, the market was crashing, the economy was uncertain. And I can remember my parents had a cash drawer. So they put money in this cash drawer. And every single week, if we were out of cash in the cash drawer, that just meant like on Saturday night, we weren't going to go out for like a fun family dinner. It didn't mean that we didn't have any money, but it was their way of essentially budgeting. And they didn't know it when they were doing it, but I was watching it and I was seeing the actions that they were taking and I was seeing that they were being prudent with their money. So I think it starts there. And then ultimately, my hope is that at some level of schooling, there's personal finance courses that somebody's helping to teach him. I can remember I took a class, I think it was on accounting, but I can remember the concept that we talked about in there of compound interest. And that was something that really stuck out to me. And I think ultimately, as people move further down the path, it really pays to have experts for especially NIL athletes. If you're earning significant money, like you really need to start to look to hire a professional team to be able to help you and get advice from them.
So we know when, we know who. The how is classes, leadership. What are you seeing in college that's been successful, or high school even? I mean, I personally believe that personal finance and financial literacy should be a mandated class for all high school athletes, but certainly for all high school students, excuse me, but certainly for high school athletes. But what's the best way to deliver financial literacy to this short attention span group of people in today's world?
It starts with letting them know that it's okay that they don't know. We live in this world where everybody wants to act like they have all the answers, even if they don't. And especially when you're dealing with athletes, there's typically some level of ego involved. There's some level of that self-belief, like we talked about. And I know what that led to for me personally was it led to a situation where like I didn't want to ask the questions because I didn't want to feel silly or like this was a stupid question. Look, this is not your area of expertise and you're learning about it. So I think it starts with letting anybody know, what athlete or otherwise, like it's okay to ask any question around personal finance. And if you don't know the answer, just ask the question because then you're going to better understand. Like something as simple as, should I be spending this money on a debit card versus a credit card? What is a debit card versus a credit card? Like, how do I pay for a credit card? All those sorts of questions. Like, why would you know the answer to that if you've never experienced that before? But it starts with having the permission to be able to ask those questions and not feel silly about asking them.
I think that's great advice. I love that. And you kind of dipped into my next question is what are the most common questions asked by athletes? What are the most, so I'll change it a little bit. What do young athletes care about most when it comes to money?
Young athletes care about the fact that they want to know that they're going to be quote unquote good. And what I mean by that is they want to know that they're doing all the right things, even if they're not the person that is the expert on the day to day of what they're doing. Every athlete, especially now in the age of social media, has seen the success stories. Somebody like a Magic Johnson, somebody like a LeBron James, where they've really used not only the money that they've earned, but their fame in the sport that they've played to vault themselves to the next level in business and in life. We've also seen the stories of somebody like a Mike Tyson who spent hundreds of millions of dollars and blew through a lot of money and has continued to be able to support himself through things he's doing now. Every athlete's seen that. And what they want to know is like, how do I make sure that I avoid this bad outcome? And how do I get closer to this good outcome, even if I know it's not going to happen on day one? And the thing I always point back to is I'd been in, I don't know, hundreds of different financial meetings, sitting on the other side of the table as a client. But really, the only meeting that I can really remember that really resonated with me was I can remember one of my financial advisors at one point just said, "Well, Jacob, if you retired today, here's exactly how much money you could spend." And I was like, "Oh, so I'm good." And nobody had ever given me like that number. And we had talked about all these different things from tax strategies to estate planning to investments. All that stuff was like, oh, that's okay. But I just wanted to know I was good.
I think I saw that post. If you made 10 million in your career and you took 3% out, you'd make 160 grand a year type of thing. I
Yep.
think putting that math in front of people is probably a positive thing, right? Because they've never really they may have thought about it or they think they understand it, but when they actually look at it. We're getting down to the end of this, and this is a great conversation, and it's so important. It's so vital. We teach basic financial literacy in our program, certainly not the depth that you do, and we're not financial advisors. But give me some word speak here, some bullet point material, some bulletin board material. What are the key points of advice for young athletes, parents, and then, if you will, at the end, for the leadership in college? What do you see the downfalls there that we need to talk about as well? So let's start with the advice for young athletes and their families.
The advice that I would give them is do not hire somebody who's going to speak to you in an echo chamber. With any athlete, there are a million people around you that are going to tell you how great you are. The person that you hire to be your financial team and to give you financial guidance cannot be a yes man. And what I mean by that is they have to be willing to speak the truth to you, even if the truth is having a hard conversation. Secondarily, the other thing that I would say is every athlete should know what it costs to be them. If the check shut off, if the NIL money stopped coming in, if this was the last contract that you made and you had no more income, what does the lifestyle look like today that you're living? And how much money do you need to have in the bank to be able to afford that same lifestyle moving forward?
Great answers. So let's flip it a little bit to the leadership out there, to the college coaches, administrators. Like it or not, they're in this NIL game, right? They're part of the negotiations. They're part of the value assessment. But from a leadership standpoint, what is their fiduciary responsibility, moral responsibility, ethical responsibility, and how can they execute proper financial education for this young group of athletes?
One of the hardest things for anybody in a leadership position when it comes to helping those around them with personal finance, especially in the situation where let's use the example of a college is helping their players get financially educated. They have to be very wary of who they're putting in front of that person, because whether they like it or not, you putting somebody in front of you is essentially a nod to say that like this person knows what they're talking about and you should listen to them. That is a very scary situation for any school because, as a financial team, we're kind of like a lineman in football. If we do our job, quarterback doesn't get sacked, nobody really hears anything about it. If you don't do your job and the quarterback gets sacked, you're on the front page of Forbes about how like this financial advisor blew it for this guy and he's getting sued, right? So I do think there's an element of, I understand the position that these college leaders are in. On the flip side of that, the thing I will say is, if you're going to be recruiting a player based on an NIL contract that you're going to be giving them, you owe it to them that they're better educated around what they should potentially be doing with their money and the opportunity set that they have in front of them. And I would argue that if that person is better educated on what that opportunity set looks like, the dollar amount that you're going to give them to come to your school actually gets further magnified because you'll be able to show them what the true value of that money is.
That's a great point. I like that. Yeah, I like that. And they may be willing to accept less money because they now have a better plan to retain it for the long-term future. Great advice. What did I miss? Is there anything on your list that you want to share with young athletes in my audience?
I would go back to a point I made earlier. Do not be afraid to ask questions. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I made is I let my ego get involved, that these are silly questions that I should have the answers to, and I didn't. And I didn't ask a lot of the questions early on enough. Ask the questions. If you don't understand something, ask the questions. While you can hire the best financial team in the world, it is still your money and it is still your responsibility to be a good steward of it.
Great. I have a business question. I'm a pretty big proponent of LinkedIn. I try to use LinkedIn as an example of how young people can grow their network and create lifelong opportunities. You have 26,000 followers on LinkedIn. How did you do it?
I did it by showing expertise and by educating people. And I did it out of necessity. And I did it out of necessity from the standpoint of when I got done playing baseball, I think there was a lot of people that saw what I was doing and thought, oh, here's another athlete that's doing something around money management, financial advice, because he probably has a good Rolodex of people that have some money. And I really wanted to be able to show people my expertise and not just tell them that I was an expert in what I was talking about, but really show them, hey, I really know what I'm talking about. And I'd like you to better understand what that looks like too.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing platform, LinkedIn in particular, because of the network possibilities. And I believe that young people should post regularly about things of interest other than sports. If they're into real estate or finance or fashion or cars or an industry that they want to work in, or a company that they want to work for, they should be making those connections. And so when I see someone with 26,000 followers, I know how hard that is. It takes a long time, but you've done a great job. Jacob, you're a great guest. I'm an admirer of your work and your leadership, and I thank you for that. And I thank you for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.